your hand on the Anacostia River. All right, high numbers. Raise your hand if you came on the boat with us. Nice. Raise your hand if you're going to come on the boat with us next time you're in DC. Perfect. So my name's Trey. I'm the Riverkeeper at Anacostia Riverkeeper. We've also got Quinn in the back, who's our Director of Operations and making all the things run. Friday night fishing is a really special program. It's one that we started within the first year of me coming online about 12 years ago. It just finished its 11th summer and its 10th full summer where we weren't just doing a pilot. It is one of our first projects where we worked with private dollars to do public and nonprofit good. So it's one that we particularly wanted to highlight given the theme of this year's conference. This slide is one that we have had for a long time, and I've learned that Quinn does not hate it, but it's just tired of being our only slide. It is such a good picture. This is from the dock right there in front of the Nationals baseball stadium. That's where we do Friday night fishing every Friday during the summers when school is out. The bump is now a person about yay big, and there is a third person smaller in the same family. But the fact that it's intergenerational, the fact that it's women and children who are really most impacted by some of the toxics that we see in the river, this picture just tells that whole kind of story of why we do this program, right? And how it talks to kind of both audiences that we see. What worked before? Beautiful, thank you. So Anacostia Riverkeeper, we are restoring and protecting the Anacostia River for everybody that lives, works, and plays in the watershed. We advocate for a healthy river for all of its communities, for people, right? People in DC, people up in Sandy Spring and Olney, where it's actually still halfway rural, up in Montgomery County, animals, plants, everybody. We do that by connecting people. So one of the big problems with the Anacostia River is that people have not been on it. This room is a rarity that this many people, the majority of people in any given space, can say that they've actually been on the river, right? For most people who actually live next to it, including a lot of neighborhoods of color, generations deep east of the river and otherwise in wards 5, 6, 7, and 8 in DC, their interactions with the river have been seeing it from traffic, right? From a bus, from the Metro Bridge next to Benning. That's about it. And they've been hearing for a long time how dirty and dangerous that river is. Creating these ways to connect people to the river is really, really important to them developing a different idea of what the river is, right? And what the river can be to them and for them, giving them some ownership. Boat tours and fishing are two of our best ways of introducing people to their own river, right? And that's important. This is already their river. It is their river legally as a matter of public trust doctrine, right? But it's also their river culturally. Reasons why we have to do this work. It is not safe to eat fish from anywhere in the District of Columbia and from a lot of parts of Maryland within the DMV region, unless you're going to actually measure out how many ounces of fish you are consuming, how often. How many people in the room eat fish? Keep your hands up if you eat finfish. So not just shellfish. Keep your hands up if you've ever eaten a fish you caught yourself. Oh. Keep your hands up, put your hands back up, whatever, if you've eaten a fish someone you know caught. So maybe you are not the one doing the fishing, right? But they said, hey, I got a bunch of fish today, come on over. I have more fish than I want to deal with tonight, come help. All right, thank y'all. How many of y'all have ever eaten fish because that's what there was available? Subsistence angling is a big deal with this conversation, right? There are a lot of people no longer necessarily in the district, but in our watershed still, or immediately adjacent to it, that have been gentrified out of the district, or even gentrified from now more affluent areas of Prince George's County, Montgomery County, closer to DC. They've been pushed further out, or even a county out. Just because they're not fishing on the river, or because they don't live next to the river anymore, doesn't mean they're not still eating fish from the river. Now, we advocate for the Anacostia River. There's a whole other group, Potomac Riverkeeper, that does Potomac work. Potomac fish in DC are actually more toxic than the Anacostia fish, which was a surprise finding when the district started doing more and more research on fish toxicity. How many of y'all think this is a pretty plain, easy to digest advisory? Hands up for, yeah, I get it. Hands up for, what is that? Hands up for kind of.
Yeah, kind of.
This is the simple version. This is what's on the back of the fishing license. DC, if you don't know, has the best value fishing license in the entire country. It is a whopping $13 if you're out of state and only $10 for the calendar year if you're in DC. And it's actually the easiest one I've ever tried to get. How many of y'all have tried to get a fishing license anywhere? How many of y'all try to do it somewhere not DC? Did you enjoy setting up an account and then going to a separate portal and then signing up with the portal and then doing the credit card 5 times? The DC one's actually really easy. And if you search DC fishing license, the first 5 things that Google comes up with are all correct. So at that point in the process, outreach and education is really good. This is on the back of every DC fishing license, right? If you get it virtually, which is the easier option now than going to a hardware store, you still get this. And it's pretty easy. Don't eat American eel, carp, or striped bass. This is the 2016 advisory. Prior to 2016, it was don't eat eel, carp, or blue catfish. So the district moved blue catfish to the safe to eat list, right? That's good if you're trying to get rid of them because they're an invasive species, which they are. It's bad if you know for a fact that those fish can be toxic. Then you get to the more complicated part at the bottom. And remember, this is still the simple version. No more than 4 servings per month for adults of sunfish. Sunfish are any of the pumpkin seeds, right? The little panfish. They are the lowest down the food chain you can get and be looking at fish that most people are going to put on a plate. Blue catfish, 3 servings. Largemouth bass, fun to catch, don't eat them, 2 servings per month. Brown bullhead and channel catfish are native catfish and a naturalized one that are not causing too much damage, right? Only eat 1. Why are catfish so good to eat? They're high in what? Why are they so tasty to eat? They're high in fat. That fat is where the toxins that we're concerned about bioaccumulate. When we go into the advisory a little deeper, this is what we see at the top. So this is the safe half of the DC fishing advisory. The rules are different. Back here, if you notice, 1 serving equals 8 ounces of uncooked fish. They have a little asterisk. If you're mixing species, go to the most threatening one, right? So that's pretty easy still. But the rules are different for different people. Children, right? Small children, they're going to eat a 3-ounce portion of fish. That's pretty much fine. Ladies, you only get 6 ounces. That would not have stood with any girlfriend of mine, but that's the rules. Everybody else gets 8 ounces of fish. This means that how you're accounting for fish is different. How many of y'all have ever weighed the fish you were eating in the first place? How many of you have had it weighed for you at the grocery store or the fish market? Is that fish a threat?
Maybe.
Potentially, probably not. Mostly not compared to what we're talking about. So the only fish that people know how much it weighs are not the fish that we're most worried about. And that's a big problem. As you go down, right, you're moving up the food chain in most cases, you're also getting to bigger and bigger fish. A bigger fish, an older fish, a more predatory fish, all of those are axes along which the fish become more toxic. Now it's not just bioaccumulating in a big fish, right? It's biomagnifying as you move up the food chain. The dirt that we have in the Anacostia is toxic, but it's not so toxic as to make someone sick. You don't have enough lifespan to eat enough dirt from the river bottom to get sick. You do have enough lifespan to eat enough fish to get sick because you're magnifying fish to fish to fish to insects to dirt. Now, all the fun ones normally to eat are down here on the dangerous list. Credit where credit is due. Y'all see striped bass on the do not eat list. How many of y'all live in the Chesapeake Bay? How many of y'all are shocked to see DC saying don't eat striper? That is a big deal culturally in the Bay. to say, don't eat rockfish. That's a really, really big deal. It was such a big deal that in 2016, when the district put this advisory out, Maryland issued a press release within hours saying it's okay, Maryland striper are safe to eat. Earlier this year, I found out that Maryland has not necessarily tested that many striper on the Anacostia River. So we have two messages that's prompted us to start Friday night fishing. The first one is the scary one, it's the public health issue. The risks of eating these fish because of the toxics, it's not like swimming where the risk is you might throw up or have diarrhea. The risks are a lot more distant, they're a lot more abstract. So they're harder to communicate, but they're much more severe. The risks are cancer risk, but we're pretty glib about cancer risk in our day-to-day lives, right? I forget to use sunscreen. I eat fried food. People still smoke. Right? We take cancer risk pretty shallowly in some cases. The thing that gets people's attention is risks to their children. And so the big scary thing, because of PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls in our sediments from old industrial uses, old dump at Kenilworth, Navy Yard, Pepco's power stations, Pepco's transformer yard where they were fixing old transformers. There's a fair amount of PCBs in the ecosystem and they don't break down. Before PFAS were the forever chemicals, PCBs were our first introduction to forever chemicals. And they're cousins, if you don't know. Polychlorinated and polyfluorinated. It's just one step up the periodic table. Those toxins can also cause lifelong learning and behavior disability in children born to mothers who ate that fish. And it's not because they maybe ate that fish while they were pregnant. It's because they had eaten that fish ever. For men, it's cancer risk only. We take our PCBs into the dirt with us. For women, you don't have any control. While you're building a baby brain at any point in the future, the brain will be crafted with fat from your body. And that fat is going to contain whatever fat soluble compounds were in you already from the time you were born until the point of pregnancy. And because they preferentially go to early development, in a healthy human body, fattiest organ is the brain, those tissues soak that up the most. And so we see not physical disability, but behavioral disability. And if you think about behavioral disability beyond early childhood and beyond school, we start to move into social issues, higher jail rates, right? Higher going back to jail rates, more likely not just to not do well in school, but to get into trouble. And so we see social harm coming from these toxins in addition to individual harm. To work on this, I could go down the bank of the river and talk to each angler that I see. My predecessors did some of this work. I don't look like most of the anglers. Most of the anglers in the district are of color. From Kenilworth Park south, it's mostly people of African-American descent. From Kenilworth Park north, and then on into Prince George's County, Montgomery County, it's mostly people of Hispanic descent. So I don't look like the angler. I don't know if that angler has a family or is thinking about a family, right? He may not have any kids to be worried about. I'm interrupting that angler in their space while they're trying to not be around people in the first place. There's reasons why people go fishing, right? And I'm telling them that what they're doing is hurting their family. That's not a message that's well received, right? Civil, sure. It's not going to be well received. They're not going to change any minds that way, or not many. Instead, we came up with Friday night fishing. We invite people to our event. That dock is our space that evening. They're using our gear, which we have provided to them free of charge. They're there because we target youth and family outreach, right? So we know they have kids. Kids here fishing with them. So when they ask why this kid can't take this fish home, there's nothing abstract about that. Is this fish can make this kid sick. That hits hard. And so we're having the same exchange of information, but it's been inverted. So they're in our space, they're asking us a question. I'm not talking at them, I'm answering a question for them. So we create a different dynamic, right? Which makes that impact a lot more meaningful. We have a whole other set of people in DC that haven't lived there for very long, right? More affluent, more white. In most places in the country and the world, it is safe to eat the fish. They're used to that. They take that for granted. And so we also have to curb them and be like, maybe not yet, right? The other thing with DC and access to the Anacostia River is that along 8.5 miles of river, there's only one place where you can just bump into the river, right? Without having deliberately come there. Physical access to the river is very inhibited. And so most people don't have that relationship. That's why we do the boat tours and why we do fishing, is to introduce people to what is their river, right? And this is often the first time that they've interacted with it. And it's really nice. Friday evening in the summer, DC is hot. DC is the hottest place I've ever lived, ever. My personal record is 118-degree heat index, July 2019. The breeze on the river, if you're going to be outside in DC in the summer, you don't have AC at home, right? There's no law guaranteeing AC. You're guaranteed heat, not guaranteed AC. Being on the river is a really nice time to be there. If you're there for the sunset part, right, when we're in there in the late afternoon and early evening, it's pleasant. And so we're introducing people to their river in a positive way. And we're starting to combat that idea that this is not a place to be, right? So we're increasing ownership of their river. How many of y'all know how to fish? How many of y'all know how to fish enough to like go fishing, but maybe not a lot? How many of y'all have no idea how to fish? How many of your parents taught you how to fish once? How many of your grandparents definitely knew how to fish? Right, so I'm 39. Generation on either side of me, mostly our parents got taught to fish by their parents, our grandparents. They didn't feel confident enough to teach us all the time, or we didn't go a lot, right? And so now if we have kids, we may or may not feel confident in teaching our kids how to fish. That means that just from grandparents to kids, right, that knowledge is gone. There's an intergenerational gap there. That's also a really cool opportunity for intergenerational connection. So it doesn't happen for free, right? We're talking about private dollars in nonprofit work. This was originally an out-of-pocket pilot. We ran it for 3 weeks the first summer. Proof of concept, we got like rods from whoever had rods, right? We were getting whatever for bait that was cheap. And we invited whoever picked up on a couple of social media blasts and whoever we were talking to in person that summer. So we had a really successful showing. The next year, Walmart moved into DC. When Walmart moved into DC, one of the arrangements with the city is that they required Walmart to fund social good projects. So we were one of those projects. So our first several years of Friday night fishing for the full summer, 8 to 10 nights, depending on storms, that was funded through Walmart. When Walmart reneged on their deal with the city and closed or didn't even open the store that they were supposed to open in Ward 8, east of the river, where they most needed a store for jobs and for access, they also closed out a legal deal and they closed out the community fund. So we were funding this pretty much out of pocket for a few years. A few years back, Colonial Pipeline said, hey, let's do some cleanups together. We'll give you a little money to do a cleanup. How many of y'all caught Quinn stock? Nice. Then they said, we want to do more. We don't just want to do a cleanup where our staff come out and do a cleanup. So they said, what else do you have that needs funding? And it's going to be a little more public funding. And we said, ooh, this one, right? Because it's one that was too good to let drop, but it was one that was a financial negative for us for several years. And so they came in as the presenting sponsor for last year. And then again for this year, we expect them to come back on next year as well. So they're spending a significant amount of money, right? Because it's not just the gear. The gear is actually pretty cheap. And if you have good partners, a lot of the gear gets donated. We work with District Department of Energy and Environment. They have various phases of fishing education that they do. They have a lot of fishing rods, right? Rods are cheap. They're easy to have donated. The fishing companies love to donate this kind of stuff. Reels are expensive. And reels are the moving part. So when that kid is really excited and cranking on that reel, the reel is the one doing the good work and also taking the brunt of that 5-year-old's excitement. And so the reels, though expensive, they fall out of use pretty quickly. That's one of the ones that needs to be funded going forward. You can get discounts from different companies. Zepco used to have an educator discount. I'm not sure if they still have that or what the rules are on it for now. We haven't used it in a while, but there are resources, and you can talk to your local or state agencies. They may have a tie-in, right? Or even if they don't have a contact, they may be able to get that contact and bring it back to you. How many of y'all are a nonprofit looking to, and then keep your hands up if you're looking to implement one of these. Keep your hands up if you've already done some of this, like with us, like Abel, Defensores de la Cuenca. It's a very solid way to do outreach, right? It gets different audiences that you might not be engaging already, or it gets the same audience a lot more excited. We partner on this since the beginning with Earth Conservation Corps, another nonprofit. They have the pump house right there by the baseball stadium. We store our stuff there, right? We store the gear there. They help us with maintenance. We try to hire at least a couple local youth to help teach the kids how to fish. So this can be a green jobs opportunity if you get enough funding to cover that part. It can be a volunteer opportunity. So we actually just had this summer, we had an intern. We paid him for the first summer. He previously volunteered with us as a scout, working the dock. He previously was one of the kids fishing on the dock. The program has been going long enough now that we've seen that kind of evolution, right, of our relationships with different individuals. So any questions on the fishing part before we jump into water quality?
I wanted to ask what kind of interventions you do then with the families when they come down. Like, do you do educational content, or what do you do with them?
So the families, there's postcards and educational stuff up at the tent. It's usually where Quinn is hanging out, checking people in and doing some of the face-to-face outreach. A lot of our outreach at the table is literally up top. It's on the boardwalk in front of the baseball stadium. Not everybody comes down to the dock. So for the dock itself, we'll see 100 to 150 people across 3 hours each evening. When you cut to unique individuals, it's usually about 500 people per summer, right? But with 1,000 plus participants before you start checking to see who came back. We have some families that come back every week, right? We have some that we see once and maybe we see them again next year. Maybe we see them in 2 years, maybe never again. On the dock, we're constantly working the dock itself. We're also talking to everybody, pausing, chatting. And when someone catches a fish, that's the main intervention, right? We talk about why it's catch and release. And as long as we've been doing it, and even with the returning numbers that we get, we still have people, if not every night, every other week, asking, hey, can I take this home? Right? There's enough need in the area that people want to take that fish home. It's not usually a novelty thing. On occasion it is, but more often it's somebody wants to take fish home so that they have protein. And then it's what I described earlier. It's the face-to-face, this fish may make that kid sick, and these are the risks, and this is why.
Does that always work, or do they sometimes?
In our space, it's a hard rule.
Yeah.
And we lay it out. Yeah. Everything is marketed as catch and release fishing. So we try to head that off at the beginning. We reiterate it, and then if it comes up again, it's a hard and fast rule. What are the questions?
Do you have any idea your numbers, how many people are just dropping in because they're in the vicinity, and how many people are maybe coming in from different ways, metro or driving in?
Not good ones. We've started trying to do some more like survey questions, but we haven't formalized it enough to have a good set of numbers on that part.
Is it a barriers of location for people to come in from other parts of the city?
Quinn, did you survey some of the zip code data?
Yeah, so where we are in DC is very metro accessible and it's about accessible. The issue is folks who are trying to drive to us. We also do line up with a lot of mass baseball games, and that's going to exacerbate the transportation issue. We'll have folks that come in from Maryland, folks from Virginia, and others who walk right over from their apartment. We do try and capture a lot of folks from the Capitol Hill region, as that's one of our focuses with the other funder program. But I would say the vast majority of folks are coming in from DC and Maryland, many of whom are arriving by public.
So we've mixed trying to get ward data. So DC has 8 wards, Ward 7 and 8. Now across the river, formerly strictly east of the river, they're the 2 most disadvantaged, the most disfavored wards in the city. But we also pull zip code data because Capitol Hill Community Foundation is the other funder. And they've been the one that's been with us, not funding at a presenting level, but every single year. They've been a really steady partner to the program.
How do you handle licensing?
We advise everyone of the law. We say you should have a license. This is how you get a license. It's really easy. It's $10, 13 if you're out of state. It's not our job to police the licensing. It's also mostly it works out itself because it's kids, and kids can fish without a license until age 16. So in the district, the rule is ages 16 through 64 require a license. But we advise people they need the license. We advise people they could be checked for a license if Harbor Patrol wanted to roll up, and we advise them how to get the license. In 11 years, Harbor Patrol has not chosen to come enforce with a bunch of kids. It's not impossible. With some of the things we've done with Defensores up in Maryland, Maryland is tighter on natural resource management. And we've had some folks come out looking for licenses, and also proactively, we asked them to come talk about how to get a license. We actually tried to get licenses into people's hands. The portal was a little bit of a hazard for that. As I mentioned earlier, the portals for a lot of states are hard. And if you are not documented or poorly documented, it can be a lot harder or impossible. District, pretty easy to get a license, but
Can you explain that concept of biomagnification?
yeah.
Yeah.
So there's 2 words that get used interchangeably often: biomagnification and bioaccumulation. In a single body, in a single individual, it is bioaccumulation. I start with whatever fat, and if there's toxins in that fat, whatever toxins in my body from my mom. As I consume fat, right, whether I'm burning that fat, any toxins that come in are going to pile up. Think about it with vitamins too, right? You can actually overdose on vitamin E because it's a fat soluble, it's oily, it's not watery. You can, but it is about impossible to overdose on vitamin C because it's water soluble. If you start to get too high, you literally just pee it out. But if things are in the fat, things that are oily to feel or in the nature, which a lot of our toxins, pesticides, fossil fuel chemicals, PCBs, PFAS, then they move in the fat instead. And so they stay in the body and they just pile up. So as you get older and you encounter more toxins, they literally accumulate inside your body. Now, if that's in a small worm, then at the moment that worm gets eaten by a small fish, now those toxins are in the fish. And some portion of them will become integrated to the fish itself. That small fish will eat thousands of worms, right, before it gets eaten by a medium-sized fish. Now we're talking about magnification. You've upped the dose 1,000 times, or whatever the number is. 1,000 is just an easy, clean number for the example. Each medium fish eats thousands of small fish, each of which ate thousands of worms, each of which lived their whole life in the dirt. Now we're thousands and thousands, we're at millions. We don't like small fish, we like big fish. So that big fish eat thousands of medium fish, now you're at billions. And to eat a fish, 1,000 fish in a lifetime is actually not hard, right? Even eating fish just for fun or as a novelty, 1,000 fish is a fish a day for not quite 3 years. So that's a subsistence fishing thing. 1,000 fish could be a fish a week for 21 years.
We have a question from online. Someone asked, are there other communities in the Bay watershed that host ongoing events like ARK's Friday night fishing?
I assume yes, but I don't know.
Okay.
So in the district, Friends of Anacostia Park, Mr. Holmes has a fishing event often up at the Anacostia Park boat ramp by the skating rink. I think they're 2 years into doing that pretty regularly. District Department of Energy and Environment has a staff person that's an avid angler, and he's kind of upped their outreach for actual in-person events. They do 2 or 3 big ones a year. Abel, are you still doing some or planning more? So Defensores de la Cuenca will be doing some more, and his are more widespread out. He's not restricted to just the Anacostia River watershed. Well, there'll be more time for more questions after, but I want to tee up Brandon. So Brandon is here with Xylem. They are our partner on a continuous water quality monitoring project. So they're going to be doing real-time data for us. This is a brand spanking new project. We got the final go-ahead from y'all last week.
Yes, last week.
Yeah.
Yep, so thanks, Trey. Thank y'all. Appreciate y'all for having me. So my name is Brandon Friedland. I'm a project manager with Xylem. I work in the Columbia offices for a group called Pure Technologies. That's kind of a side note to what we do with Reservoir Center. So Reservoir Center is actually a physical location in DC, right on the Anacostia, where local utilities, professional organizations, and private manufacturers and consultants have combined forces, so to speak, to kind of put some good back into the world. And one of the major ways that, excuse me, that I've been able to be involved is starting recently as a project manager for our water quality in DC real-time monitoring program. So a little bit about the background or the thought process. In March of this year, our leadership and some folks that work in the Reservoir Center had a come to Jesus moment, so to speak, where they really wanted to find something new to do that was going to be impactful, that would actually give some value back to folks like Trey and the Riverkeepers, but also provide some of the public outreach component that we need. One of the things that's kind of near and dear to my heart, I serve as the public outreach chair for the Chesapeake Water Environment Association. And one thing we're trying to do this year and moving forward is really engage with the public in a more kind of normal way. And we think providing an online database for the river status of their local tributaries would be really impactful. So this slide kind of speaks for itself, what our goals here are. Ultimately, environmental advocacy being the main one here. So what's being done right now, there are a lot of data resources online for water quality, and there's federal programs, there's state programs. The Riverkeepers have a great program. What we're kind of contending here is that we want to improve that process. A majority of that data, water quality wise, is actually gathered manually. So we're thinking that that might be an opportunity for our technology's advancement. But it's also limited. Some of the technology that's out there for USGS or other federal organizations is somewhat limited on what data is actually being recorded and how that data is accessed. So here's kind of an initial map of what we're looking to install. Is a series of buoys and land-based sensor applications along the major riverways in the DC area, and also expanding into the Shenandoah. So you can see along the Potomac and the Anacostia, and then the ultimate goal here is to start out with 10 locations, but then move, a couple new locations every year based on the volunteer support for maintenance and that sort of thing. One important note here is they will be strategically placed. So what we mean by that is we're going to not just put them in a river anywhere that they would go, but someplace that actually makes sense, near an intake for a water treatment plant or an outfall of major pollutant areas or for point source pollution. Here's a little bit of an overview of the technological concept. As I mentioned, a series of sensors that would be either buoyed or mounted on a land-based application where they're kind of all collected together. So we have any number of data points from the chemistry of the water to temperature, pH, ORP, dissolved oxygen, and chlorophyll A, some other algal-based measurements.
How many of y'all have used YSI before? The probes, the digital probes?
Yes, so this will be on the YSI EXO platform, which is their more robust remote monitoring platform. You see hydrosphere here, that's kind of their come with it program that is an online based app where all the data is collected. And the goal is to be able to connect that application with via API to other visualization platforms. And yeah, here's where we talk a little bit about visualization. So ultimately, we want to bring in data from USGS and the other federal resources, other state run programs. So the river keepers will still need to be out there for maintenance for this type of equipment, but also certain parameters aren't able to be remotely monitored, such as E. coli. So that sort of work will need to continue, and in some locations, it will free up some volunteer time to do that a little more frequently. In terms of visualization, we want to bring in weather data, status of other issues going on that we can connect online with, as I mentioned, API. So that would be a kind of a goal in the future. So with that, I'll leave. It's kind of brief, but any questions or comments?
And apologies, our emails were supposed to be more visible, and it activated the link and made them invisible. I'll highlight them for y'all real quick. Nope, I won't.
Mhm.
Well, if you want to get in touch with me, I have a couple cards I can hand out and we can exchange emails.
So the buoys are tethered, how do you, I don't know how to agree. The Anacostia is kind.
Anacostia is 3 to 4 feet of vertical tide. So that's not a lot for a buoy to compensate with. But the anchor will need something. So you can set up sort of an elastic. Right. You can also set up a counterweight, depending on how long it's going to be out there and how long, what your maintenance options are. So, but the buoy moving, 4 feet of slack vertically isn't going to be a whole lot of swing for the buoy.
Is there accessible by canoe?
Yeah, they'll be either in areas where folks can either paddle or motorboat too.
We can mostly get to the not land-based ones by our skiff. So
we've been trying for years to have robots do it, but they're not working out.
I'm actually going to ping you about that after some other questions. So
They're not working out, so I think we give it a.
was that the mayfly?
Right?
Were those the mayfly ones, or what was that?
The robots, they go down a ramp, they center, they go back up every, I don't know.
That's interesting.
Was that a software issue, or was that a physicality issue?
The flash flooding of the creek.
And it's taken some robots to their watery grave.
Yeah.
And it's common because all the. So when I say the main stem of the river is 3 to 4 feet tide, that's mostly predictable. Urban flashiness is not. So the creeks, if we had something in a creek, it'd have to be a lot hardier. The creeks around DC, Watts Branch, for instance, in Northeast DC, it can go from 1.5 feet, 2 feet deep to close to the ceiling like that in a big storm.
In 2 hours.
And it falls right back down. You can look at the hydrographs from some of the USGS stations and tributaries and urban creeks. One of the reasons why they're so eroded is because it's drought, punch. And it's just that same process over and over and over, jetting them out.
For the monitoring with the sensors, is there a lot of maintenance, like as far as the battery or data?
Yes, so we anticipate the initial visits to be at least twice a month for the first 6 months or so, just to actually measure the battery usage and make sure that there's not a whole lot of muck or mud filming on the sensor nodes themselves. But at least a couple times a month, once or twice a month. And the maintenance is pretty easy, pulling them out in the buoy themselves, that you can pretty much do that right there in a boat. So it should be pretty streamlined.
They have a wiper, so that's
Yes.
that's the maintenance on top of it already wiping consistently the notes, but it is super sedimented. The Anacostia is losing 1 centimeter a year of depth. So you can imagine the silt and the clay that are in the water column at any given time.
And this battery span, like,
I'm not 100% positive, but they are 12 amp hour lithium ion batteries, as far as I understand. So they should last a good while.
So it's continuously.
Yeah.
How are you funding this?
So
They're funding it.
yeah, so the first 5 years of maintenance as well as the equipment is kind of a goodwill from Xylem. However, the Reservoir Center is purchasing that at cost. So the Reservoir, as I mentioned, is a consortium of utilities. We have DC Water, WSSC, we have professional associations like CWEA, and then private manufacturers, consultant companies can donate to Reservoir, and that's where that funding comes from. So our goal and kind of my job moving forward is going to be finding avenues of grant monies to help fund the maintenance and expansion of this project.
Can you talk more about, the platform you use for the data, Hydrosphere, I think it was, and how often it's updated data?
Sure. So I admittedly am somewhat limited on Hydrosphere. I could definitely connect with you after.
What Brandon didn't say is that he came onto this project 2 weeks ago.
Oh.
Yeah, but nonetheless, from what I understand is that it would be depending on the location. So how these remote systems typically work is they'll collect data and then they'll send it out when signal's good. And if signals come constantly good, they'll send out data more regularly at like a 5-second interval. And if signal is not so strong, it'll be less frequent. And the battery usage will be dependent upon that. How Hydrosphere will collect the data is as it gets it. And then it does have a visualization component where it actually maps. So you can, scroll over an area and see what the readout is. And it'll pretty much collect in the CSV format. So very, very standardized. You can export it right from Hydrosphere. Did that answer?
Yeah, I have a follow-up.
Sure.
Is there, weather data associated with each location?
So not on these sensor platforms. That's what we want to hopefully incorporate from maybe the Weather Service or something similar. There are groups that pull that data together already very well. So we don't want to kind of reinvent the wheel. But as I was mentioning about the API integration, we think that pulling that all in together into one platform is a good goal to shoot for.
I work with NOAA currently, and it kind of sounds like a smaller version of the Anacostia movies that we do in Chesapeake Bay. How often are you going to do maintenance? Because usually we do weekly maintenances because of biofouling. I don't know how that works with,
So we won't be brackish, and that helps with the fouling a lot. And the things that are fouling are going to be a lot softer. So the wiper takes care of a lot of that. If it's fouling the cylinder, right, it's not nice, but it's not a problem for their sensitivity of their instrument. So the wiper is constantly wiping. And so that's handling a lot of that biofouling. We'll go back out to either rinse off or swap out and take back to clean the actual sensors themselves. We're thinking every 2 weeks during growing season, basically, and then once a month probably in the winter.
I have a pro tip for XO2s and maintenance on the body. We found if you put press and seal that you get like at the grocery store that you would put over your like leftovers and then you tape that on, it's just so much easier to rip off, dispose of, and clean.
Good idea.
That's my pro tip.
Fine, thank you.
You're working with the Commons to do the mapping?
So yeah, that's who we're talking to right now.
And how's that, I'm really interested in the funding of this. How is that being, is Xylem also funding work?
So the whole project is funded by the Reservoir Center, and majority of that money is grants. It's some private equity, but the ongoing data management will be kind of a question in the future. So we have up to 5 years from now.
Okay.
And then after that, it's kind of, we need.
So you have 5 years to figure it out?
Yeah.
Okay. And another, have you gotten any pushback from agencies or industry or the city, or are they just, is everybody just kind of ignoring that this is happening?
The district was already using a Xylem platform previously.
Okay.
They're actually in the process of hopefully re-upping some of their sensors that they already had.
Okay.
So they had already made the same choice of who to work with previously, as
Okay.
far as a contractor. So that's an easy one. And we're lucky DOE is well-funded and forward-thinking and very pro-environment. So
I just can't imagine trying to do this in Baltimore.
Yeah.
Right? Like I can't, that would be invaluable, and I can't imagine.
Well, that is, so, well, full disclosure, I live in Baltimore,
Okay.
so. Picking up this project, it's kind of serendipitous. I've always wanted to do this in the area because we have some pretty bad problems, and I think. It would only add to our, ammunition to get them resolved if we had constant monitoring. So
yeah, and they know that, and that's the
Yeah.
reason for the potential pushback.
it really was. So maybe we could talk more about if you have any thoughts on how we can, approach them, but that is the goal.
Okay,
We're interested in exploring maybe some fluorescent work too as proxies for E. coli, because that is, you can't measure E. coli real time, but you can measure proxies real time. And so as those technologies develop, that's something we're going to be looking at. Very cool. The district has the unfortunate distinction of being the only place in the entire country where it is illegal to swim in your public trust waterways. Not just frowned upon, but actually illegal.
Do they go with the salt too? Salt?
We don't have any salt except in winter runoff. So somebody wrote a book once about the Anacostia and it mentioned the river being brackish, and that's false. Even right now in a historic drought, the salt line is still down somewhere around the 301 bridge on the Potomac. It would be an incredible drought for us to see significant salt in the Anacostia.
We see a huge spike in the spring.
We are looking at chloride though as one of the probes.
Right, yeah, we
So
see
for
a
road salt runoff, we're looking
giant
at that.
Spike in the spring.
Will you guys have sensors at different depths, or is it a certain depth you're trying to monitor?
They're gonna be at
Surface.
yeah. So depending on the location, the buoys will be designed to kind of stay within the tidal range of a certain, whatever location we're at. But yeah, the surface water is what we're looking.
So a lot of our interest from the nonprofit side is documenting water quality with an eye towards moving the district towards swimmable. That's one of the big things that guided where we put sensors, and that's going to be one of the things that educates what we're looking at as best as we can. The Anacostia is also really shallow, so we don't have an opportunity for a lot of depth profiling in the first place. We're only 20 feet deep in the very narrow channel at the mouth of the river. It quickly becomes a regulation depth of 8 feet, but has not actually been dredged. So above that, it can be pretty shallow. We run our skiff. We got our skiff designed to be 18 inches of draft on purpose. Any more virtual questions?
Nope, none came in.
Sweet. Well, unless y'all are mad at us letting you get out before dinner early. Thank y'all.
is there anything not to see the sheet?
Thank you.
Okay, yeah.
And please fill them out.